Hello, girls. Good afternoon, and you are all very welcome to today's IoT session. Thank you so much for making it today. For those who doesn't know me yet, I'm Natalia. We probably were in touch in certain point of your journey during the cybersecurity bootcamp for women. I'm delighted with the feedback we are getting. Thank you so much for answering our survey for the end of the course. We really appreciate any comments you girls can give us. It's very important for our improvement. As you all know, the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women was created last year during for the International Women's Day. So this is our second year, and for your bootcamp, we had over 700 people enrolled, and we have trained already over 5,000 women in for the to start learning about the industry. We have all kinds of professionals, the teenagers just getting to college, and women changing careers. So anything, any questions you guys might have, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. I believe we have almost everyone online now. So I would like to call Paul to join us. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, Natalia, and thank you, and welcome everybody to this live training session as part of your cybersecurity bootcamp for women. So, as Natalia has introduced me, I am Paul C. Dwyer, the president of the ICTTF, and you will be familiar with my dulcet tones from the videos that you've been studying through the bootcamp. And these bootcamps are really, really important for many, many reasons. For one, drawing attention to the fact that the industry is made up of primarily men, which is crazy when you think that there's over 6 million open cybersecurity jobs around the world. And we want to shine a light on that and be able to introduce people that may have even beforehand not considered a career in cybersecurity and thought it was all about one specific discipline, so that they can actually understand and appreciate that there's so many different disciplines involved in cybersecurity and risk management, privacy, everything from legal, compliance, anti-money laundering, technical architecture, procurement. All of these pieces all make up an effective cyber security and cyber risk management program. And hopefully you have appreciated that through the number of modules that you did in the completed in the cybersecurity bootcamp for women. And it's also very important, as I'm going to underpin during our presentation here. It's so important for society and for our way of life that we all learn how to play our part in defending our digital way of life, our cyber ecosystem from threat actors. And I'll go a little bit deeper on that in a moment, guys. But let me just commence off, because I do have a set number of slides. I've introduced myself. So if you want to know more about my own career and background, you can go to Paul C. Dwyer, or please, by all means, connect to me on LinkedIn. And of course, ICTTF.org itself is a great community for like-minded professionals who want to make a difference and not just connect with myself, but for lots of others who are on the forums there and able to build that human network. Because as you probably know at this stage, what we say in ICTTF is it takes a network to defeat a network. The bad guys are networked, they share, they collaborate, they help each other. So all the good guys, we need to do that as well. So one of the modules that you would have looked at and absorbed on the cybersecurity bootcamp for women was around understanding that background of cyber threats, the underground economy of cybercrime, and so on. And in preparing today's presentation, I thought that I'd like to bring it to life a little bit more for you, based on what's happening in the real world and the importance of potentially you embarking or developing your career in the world of cybersecurity. So some of these slides you may be familiar with because I've referenced them from the material itself, but I need to contextualize where we're starting our little conversation from. And then there's a fact that we all live in two worlds. We live in a real physical world, and we live in a cyber world or digital world, if you like. And in the real physical world, there's laws, there's social norms, and indeed there's consequences if you break those laws or you don't follow those social norms. For example, in the real physical world, if I want to steal something, I would have to get physical access to it and be able to take it away. I would probably be maybe observed, there may be evidence, maybe CCTV, there could be an investigation, and I may face what we call attribution. That's to say, I may face legal consequences, I may face jail time, whatever it happens to be. But in the cyber world, it's all very different because the threat actor, the criminal, the bad guy can do whatever they want with almost impunity from for wherever they want. They can be sitting on a beach, and once they have access to the internet, they can carry out and they don't you don't always notice the asset has been stolen because it may be that they've copied the data, and the asset can be sold numerous times. They can sell your data hundreds and thousands of times fairly quickly around the world in all the different marketplaces. So there's vast differences between how these threat actors operate within the physical world and the real world. But those threat actors operate in both worlds, and they may do some certain parts of their modus operandi maybe in the real physical world, and some of it may be dedicated within the cybersphere. And we'll talk again a little bit more about that. But let's remind ourselves of some of the top cyber threat actor groups and their motivations, because again, what I need you to understand is that these people work together. And you can almost think of this infographic as a Venn diagram of overlapping circles. And in the middle of all those circles that overlap is your adversary. That's your enemy. That's who you're up against. You may have cyber criminals whose motivation is to make money. You may have nation states who do it for geopolitical reasons, hacktivists, ideological reasons perhaps, terrorists, propaganda, violence, and even thrill seekers who are just doing it for fun, for kudos, for notoriety. And then, of course, we've insiders. And normally the insiders, even going back a few years, we would have said insiders, their motivation is their discontent. But actually, a lot of insiders themselves are actually victims of a cybercrime, and they are being coerced and forced to carry things out from within inside your networks. And so that's a change to it. So I like to start off presentations like this about talking about something like, it's quite big and it's the most obvious thing. And I often use this image of an elephant in the room, and we hit straight into that topic. But what I want to use the elephant for today is to illustrate the fact that how all of these threat groups and threat motivations and threat actors are all actually the same thing, but we look at them from a different angle. And that's one of the failings of the cybersecurity industry. We try to silo our approach and say, we're just going to deal with this threat, and we're just going to deal with this kind of thing, instead of looking at it holistically. So in this image here, what I want you to think of is blind people walking into a room, and there's an elephant in that room. Some people go to the rear of the elephant. Some people go to the front of the elephant. Those at the rear of the elephant are touching the elephant, and they think it's a rope. Someone at the front is touching the trunk, may think it's a snake. Touching the tusk, they think it's a spear. But it's actually the same thing. And that's the way I want you to think about cyber threats. All of these things lead back to one central thing. We often refer to this as pure cyber evil, because when you have mixed motivations like ideology, propaganda, violence, the geopolitics of it, and money, and you mix all these things in, at the end of the day, it's all the same stuff. It's evil. It's cyber evil. It's using cyber for nefarious gains and nefarious objectives at the end of the day. And this is a real economy, guys. I mean, it's a $6 trillion economy. It surpassed drug trafficking as the #1 crime in the world many years ago. And still we see the OCG groups, the organized criminal groups, getting deeply involved in this space because it's low risk, it's high return. And they can coerce people to getting involved in this with their old methods and their old tactics. And as law enforcement get better at thwarting things like drugs and stuff like that, they're operating in the cybersphere. But they're also operating in this cybersphere to carry out, if you like, ordinary crime or ordinary evil from the point of view of human trafficking, selling human organs online, abusing animals online and selling access, that kind of thing. That's what I mean by evil. These are the kind of things that the cyber ecosystem gets used for. It's not just stealing credit card information, it's not just stealing usernames and passwords or bank account details. It's an ecosystem that facilitates laundering money. It's a facility that supports criminality and evil of all kinds. So when you're actually working to defeat cyber evil, you're actually defeating terrorism, you're actually defeating evil, the people that traffic children, the people that traffic humans, human slavery, modern day slavery, all these kind of things. They all operate by using this cyber ecosystem. So everything we do to prevent or thwart that is a good thing. And it's a good place to play. And these marketplaces create an insatiable demand for data and for details, because as soon as something is stolen, it starts losing value, because the chances are that data has been reported, account numbers are changing, passwords are changing, and so on, and it's going down in value. So just like fruit in the market, it will go down in value as it becomes stale, as it becomes damaged, and so on. So too does the items, the data, and we often say data is the new cash, and as they steal that, it loses value. So there's an insatiable demand to keep stealing the fresh data, keep stealing the fresh passwords, the new usernames, the new details of systems, and so on. And this, for many purposes, when people think of cybercrime, cybersecurity, they almost think of just criminals, but there's a lot more actors involved, as we know. And from a criminal perspective, going back to year dot, it's a cat and mouse game. The bad guys just need to get lucky once. The good guys, we need to be lucky all the time to prevent them, to stop them, to detect them, and so on. And it's like that in the cybersecurity world. We have to be on our game 24/7, because they just need to get lucky once. And once they're in on a system and they've started to move laterally across the network and start to drop payloads and so on, this is the way it all develops and it all goes. So we have to be as sharp as anything. And it's almost that catch-up game. It's a catch-up game. What are the bad guys up to now? We need good intelligence, understand what they're doing, share good intelligence, good actionable information with other entities within the community, so they are prepared and they know what's going on, and they're able to prevent these kind of things. Now, guys, I'm about a good 10, 12 minutes into this, okay? And what I want to do is I want to leave time at the end of this briefing for me to interact with you, to have a question and answer section. But I also want to balance that off by using this as an opportunity to focus on what's happening in today's world from the point of view of cyber threat actors, what they look like, how they behave. And I'm going to take the next 20 minutes or so to make this a little bit real for you, maybe 20, 25 minutes or so, to make this a little bit real for you in relation to what's happening. And recently, I delivered a presentation which I titled, "On the Internet, Everywhere is Ukraine." And the basic concept of that title is, well, if a country like Ukraine can be invaded, so too can anybody on the internet. You know, it's a flat network, and there's no borders and so on. So your systems, your country, everything can be invaded from a cyber perspective. So let's look at what's happening from a cyber perspective in relation to some of this. Now, as I talk through the next few minutes, guys, it may seem that I'm anti-Russia. I'm very much anti-war, but I do have a love for Russia. These are actually photographs of myself when I lived and worked in Russia as a young man when I had hair. So this is me around age 20, so on, hopping out of helicopters and working in Moscow and Kazakhstan and places like that. So I have nothing but respect for Russian people, but obviously I don't have for the war that is going on in Ukraine. And I want to draw some context here now for purposes of the small amount of time I have to talk to you about this deep subject. So let's start off in 1945. Espionage, spying. This is part of almost the culture of countries like Russia, like the United States even. And I'll give you this example, which is often called The Thing, which was this Great Seal bug. So in 1945, the girl guys in Moscow literally walked across the road and went to the American embassy with a gift, gesture of friendship, to the American ambassador. And they received this gift. Thank you very much. That's great. And of course, they were suspicious of the gift. So they scanned it, they x-rayed it and everything. They found nothing inside it. Said, that's fine. Let's hang it up on the wall. For 7 years, that hung up on a wall. within a very important meeting room within the embassy. But what they didn't realize that the Russians had carved this ingenious design into the back of that seal, which meant that when this was hung on a wall, they were able to view or sorry, rather listen into that room. So it's a bit like putting a glass up to a wall and being able to listen in, and they were able to point a microphone at it. Sorry, I just got a message in there. There's a problem with the video. We'll restart that video for a second. There we go, guys. Fantastic. Sorry, guys, you should all get the video now. Excellent. Sorry about that pause. So, and what they put this in place was from the point of view of being able to listen in and use a secondary device, a pointed microphone, to be able to point at the outside wall, the exterior wall, and listening to what was going on in that room. And that went on for about 7 years or so. And then it went on to, if we look at, for example, what we call the military technical revolution, which in my opinion is probably one of the first ever keyloggers. And so a keylogger is a piece of crimeware. So crimeware, to remind you, is a piece of software created just to carry out crime. And this piece of crimeware, if you like, back in the day, was the Russians very, very cleverly intercepting the supply chain. And these are everyday techniques that are used today for cyber criminals and cyber threat actors of all kinds. This is still the kind of techniques that are being used. So they interrupted the supply chain of the American embassy, and they were able to make changes to that typewriter. So for those of you who are not familiar with a typewriter, was they would hit those keys to hit the inked ribbon and create the characters up on the paper. While they were pressing the keys, they were emitting a signal that wasn't audible to a human, but was being picked up by a receiver in another building across the road. So it's clever stuff, and it's part of that cat and mouse game in espionage and spying between nations and states and so on. And along comes the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and with the Soviet Republic, Soviet Union rather, being dismantled, if you like. What flourished was what we often refer to as gangster capitalism. And that effectively was do whatever you want to make money. So on one hand, you had oligarchs being created, owning oil wells, owning the assets of an entire nation like Russia. And then you had people who had lost their jobs, who had jobs under the Soviet regime, but now didn't have jobs. So they turned their hands, very clever people, maybe working in universities, maybe teachers of cryptography and maths, whatever it happened to be, and they turned their talents, if you like, towards cybercrime. And it became this unwritten rule, this unwritten arrangement to effectively let them operate in Russia as long as they never attacked Russians and they never targeted Russians. And that was all sort of, well, we let them do whatever they want to do. It was the Russian state's opinion. But as long as when the Russian state needed them to do something, they would do it. So if they needed somebody hacked, if they needed information, somebody would use them. And that developed, and that is how they actually operate today. And I'll talk about that towards the end of this presentation and give you some real life examples of it. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about the fifth domain, because I want you to understand how these lines are all blurred. There's no set silos. So warfare is cyber warfare is what we refer to as the fifth domain. You have warfare in land, sea, air, space, and now cyberspace. And that's a significant development. And it was about 10 years ago, The Economist magazine came up with this term. And at that stage, you had things like Cyber Command in the United States and so on, and other countries are starting to put together units. Now, there's so many countries around the world that even have conscription into cyber units, who are identifying the talents of children age 11, 12, and earmarking them to come into the military end of things within the cyber unit, because cyber warfare is so important from a defensive and offensive capability. And we saw this even when Vladimir Putin and Biden met for the first time in their first summit. So when we look at things like warfare, we have the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention are rules on warfare. And those rules are, for example, you can't bomb the Red Cross, you shouldn't hit civilian targets, that kind of stuff. There is no digital or cyber warfare Geneva Convention. So when these two guys met, they decided that they would draw some 22 red lines between each other's nations and say, well, you don't touch this and we won't touch that. You don't touch this and we won't touch that. So that was their kind of rule base or their kind of understanding when they met. And those things are broadly observed. And this is the kind of target they want. This is society. These are industrial control systems, SCADA-based systems, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, which are the systems, are the backbone of electricity, utilities, gas, um, air traffic, traffic lights, how our ATMs talk to each other. All of those things are heating, ventilation systems. All of those kind of things run off these systems that we often refer to just ICS or industrial control systems, smart buildings, those kind of things. And that's what they want to be able to target, because they know that by controlling those kind of systems, they don't need to bomb or drop bombs on a country. If you can turn off the lights, you can undermine the government of a country, because the confidence in that country and its leadership is gone if they can't keep the electricity on, if they can't facilitate heat and gas to heat people through winter. And you can see where these techniques are continuing to develop, and we see them every day. And this slide I've been using since pre the invasion of Ukraine, and that was to draw attention on the fact that that link between the geopolitics of cyber threats. So, for example, you have a situation in the real world, something may be said, and it may be one politician in America saying something which is anti-Russia, and all of a sudden you'll have an American icon, something like JP Morgan, getting attacked. And this happens within seconds. That's why the smartest people in the world of cybersecurity are very, very geopolitical aware, and they study politics, because they understand what's happening in the political scene will affect what they're going to see in the threat landscape from the position of high scale nation state attacks and what we call APTs, or advanced persistent threats, and those kind of threat vectors. So you can see how this is all blurred. And here, for example, the NCSE advising organizations to be to be aware of Russian aggression. This is also true. For example, we got warnings from the financial regulator in Ireland, and these were common warnings being issued around the world to say, wow, since the Ukraine piece has started the invasion, we are going to see an increase on the cyber threat landscape from a Russian source perspective. Now I want to introduce you to what I would suggest is one of the biggest cyber threat actors in the world, if not the biggest cyber threat actor in the world. His name is Vladimir Putin, and he uses essentially three techniques, and we'll bring those up in a moment. But his characteristics are: he's powerful, he's resourceful, he's innovative, and he's cold, and he's knowledgeable. They are key traits to somebody who's going to have such a massive impact, and we'll talk through what that looks like. And I'm all for acronyms when they're required, and this acronym is very interesting when it comes to this particular character. And the kind of techniques he's using is information warfare, cyber espionage, and cyber warfare. Well, again, we'll elaborate on those a little bit. When we look at information warfare, if you can control the truth, if you can control fake news, you can control reality. And when we see Goebbels here, who is the minister for propaganda for the Nazis, and we see Trump, and we see the misinformation, those kind of things, these are common techniques and tactics that have been used since time immemorial. And it's interesting quote that I included here from Voltaire, the French philosopher: those who make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And when you think of some of the things that somebody level-headed may see as being one of these conspiracy theories, or Hillary Clinton's running a pedophile ring and all these kind of things, well, who's going to believe that? But the fact is, people start to believe this when enough people say it and enough sources say it. And it's one of the biggest challenges we have in life now is the integrity of the truth. So back to our cyber threat actor, and where did he come from? Well, these oligarchs, these kingmakers, essentially, these were the richest men on planet Earth, and they had, during this gangster capitalism phase, they had essentially taken control of some of the biggest resources in Russia: oil, gas, that kind of thing. And they decided that money wasn't enough. They also wanted power, and they knew the president of Russia at the time was Yeltsin, and Yeltsin was a formidable character and an interesting character from the point of view that he was making more media headlines for being drunk than anything else. And they decided, well, hey, hang on a second. When he goes, which is not too long away, let's make sure we put in a puppet that we control, and we will still control Russia and all of the political relationships coming out of a powerful nation like Russia. So they decided that they were going to identify who this was. So they went about this in a very business-like way. they decided that they would engage with the professionals, spin doctors, PR people, campaign managers. So what we're looking here is Paul Manafort on the right. He was the campaign manager for Donald Trump. And it's interesting how all these kind of players are all kind of networked and work together, because Paul Manafort was also involved in trying to control who got elected as president of Ukraine. But you may know that Paul Manafort was arrested and subsequently pardoned by Trump. So these kind of birds of a feather flock together. And what their studies, what their research showed them, because they engaged these PR people, these spin doctors, these marketing research companies, and they carried out research in traditional formats. They carried out surveys in newspapers and so on in Russia and said, who would you like to be your next president? And overwhelmingly, the result came back and they wanted this guy, Max Otto von Stierlitz. Now, I'm sure none of you have heard of this guy. Well, Max Otto von Stierlitz is actually a fictional character. He's a James Bond kind of character from a TV program in Russia, a KGB agent. So they scratched their heads and said, well, where will we find this guy? He doesn't exist, whatever. So they researched and they found this loyal, mediocre, mid-level civil servant who was a spy and a Stasi agent. His name was Vladimir Putin. And they decided they would groom him to become the president of Russia, and he would be their puppet. But that was a big mistake, because Vladimir was nobody's puppet at the end of the day, as we all found out. And he worked in the KGB, essentially the Secret Service of Russia, which was rebranded, relabeled as the FSB, if you like, and they run operational signal intelligence across Russia as well. And so this relationship is very important to understand how these things work, because this is where their power comes from. And part of this grooming process was on the date of 1999, December 31st, the change of the millennium up to the year 2000. This was the first time, and you can see this video on YouTube if you look for it. This mediocre Vladimir Putin with an ill-fitting suit, mid-level civil servant, comes out with very little confidence and starts talking to the nation on such an important day. And this was the handover, if you like, of power, where he also went, you go out and talk to them. And this was a kind of a unofficial handover of power. And this guy comes out and says, who is this guy? Well, it wasn't long before he was the president of Russia, but that was the first big step for that happening. And he controls the GRU, which is the Operational Intelligence, Signal Intelligence Corps of the FSB. Effectively, they can listen and hear everything that's going on within Russia and everywhere else, effectively another arm of the spy. And they also have sub-agencies like the Internet Research Agency, also an unfortunate acronym, IRA, but the Trolls Gino. And here they decided what they would do is they would build up and train bloggers to be able to carry out misinformation campaigns, fake news campaigns. They taught them things like neurolinguistic programming, techniques on social media, all of those kinds of things. Now they have an army of 800 of these mercenaries, these people who went into buildings like that every day and worked and carried out campaigns of misinformation. And they were able to affect the narrative, swing elections, undermine people, destroy people online, and the reputations. Very powerful when you think of how influential social media is. Now, all thinking back to the elephant and the blind people walking into the room and thinking they're all looking at something different. Well, actually, when we look at some of these threat actor labels that have been identified as responsible for major campaigns, they're all the GRU. The elephant is the GRU. So whether you're looking at Fancy Bear, APT28, any of these fancy, cool names they have for these things, Black Energy, Voodoo Bear, Sophisy, any of these things, they're all the GRU. They're all Russian. And the GRU is controlled by the FSB, and the FSB is controlled by Vladimir Putin. And that's the reality of the situation. And these guys are behind major cyber operations like Bad Rabbit. You may recall things like the World Anti-Doping Agency, NotPetya, the DNC attacks, even the Chemical Weapons Watchdog when they were hacked and attacked as well. And they do this in the physical world. Even the Novichok poisoning, they do this in the physical world, and they do this in the cyber world as well. And that those converge worlds of physical and cyber in order to carry out what they're at. Now, I want to talk a little about one of the campaigns they called out, and I mentioned they're called NotPetya. Now, NotPetya is called NotPetya because it looked a lot like Petya, but it's not Petya. Right? Let me explain. Petya was a piece of ransomware, and ransomware, you may be aware, is a piece of criminal software that kidnaps your data. And the concept is you pay a ransom and your data is freed. NotPetya looked like a ransomware tool, but actually wasn't ransomware, because all it was designed to do was spread very, very quickly and destroy. It's a weapon of mass destruction. It pretended to be ransomware, but it wasn't. This was literally a tool of mass destruction. It's the only way I can describe it. And let's look a little bit about that and where that came from. So when we talk about ransomware, it kidnaps the data, you pay ransom, you're in theory, you're meant to get your data back. But this was the equivalent of, if you want to destroy all the information in a library, well, firstly, you go in, you might take all the index cards and rip those up or burn them or destroy them, whatever, and then pulp all of the books. So there's no way people can find the information. And even if they stumble across the information, there's no way they can use it because you've destroyed it. That's literally how NotPetya worked. It went in and looked at the file allocation table and all of those things about how you find the data on a system. It destroyed all of that, and then it destroyed all the information. That's what it was designed to do, and it did it very, very well. And the world at this time had just dodged a bullet. It had dodged a piece of malware known as WannaCry. And some of you may remember WannaCry. And WannaCry was this high profile piece of malware that hit the likes of the National Health Service in the UK with some devastating impact. And it started to spread across the world. And a security researcher literally stumbled across a kill switch. A kill switch was basically a way to kill it. And that kill switch was, he found in the code this domain name. And if that domain name was registered, the software, the malware would stop. So he simply bought the domain for a few dollars, and it stopped. And it stopped propagating around the world. For his sins, he ended up getting arrested as well, because it turns out that particular research was potentially or allegedly involved in some other things as well. So the world had dodged a bullet, and along comes the next thing in the media. June 27th, 2017. And there's a small company in Ukraine called MEDoc. MEDoc was a small company who had developed like a small accounts application platform for small to medium businesses, a bit like a TurboTax, a Quicken, Xero, whatever way the one you may be familiar with. And most businesses, most SME businesses in Ukraine were using this application. So the threat actor behind this attack had decided they were going after the ecosystem, the economy of Ukraine, and they thought this was a good route to do this. So that's a picture of the servers in the MEDoc server room. And they decided that they would circumvent and be able to penetrate that and reach out to all of their customers and their clients. And this is where it started. And within 45 seconds, this was taking down banks. Within 16 seconds, it took down most of the transport hub of Ukraine. I said it was fast. It was unbelievably fast at spreading and destroying, spreading and destroying. And that was its mission, and it did this. And it moved with almost insatiable force right across as it moved even outside of the world. And while it was doing this on that day, in the early hours of this, there was a guy called Pavlo Bondarenko. And Pavlo Bondarenko was working in the health sector in Ukraine. And he said, there's something wrong here. This is just going after data and trying to kill data. So he called his boss's boss, the head of the health sector. And he said, save the data, switch everything off. Save the data, switch everything off. And they listened to him pretty much immediately, and they started switching off servers. However, even though that happened, by 6 o'clock that day, 4 hospitals, all the data was gone. 6 power companies, 4 airports, 22 banks, all the ATMs were down, entire federal government, 300 companies. And it's estimated that about 10% of all the data in the country, Ukraine, was gone forever. Not ransomware, not held for ransom and you get a key and you get it. It's just gone. It's destroyed, absolutely obliterated. So it's devastating. And it didn't stop there. It started moving across. It hit Chernobyl. And it was only by luck. And when you look at Chernobyl, for those of you who, most people are probably familiar with Chernobyl, what happened there, but that big building in front of you, that holds 200 tons of uranium. That is the size of the Statue of Liberty. It's as wide as the Colosseum in Rome. And there's about 1,000 computers or so monitor and take care of what's happening around that system, everything else like that. And the engineers had 7 minutes to turn off all 1,000 machines as NotPetya was moving right across that and killing the safety controls, which was protecting all of us. Because believe me, I don't believe if radiation knows about borders or where to stop and not stop. So it was saving the planet effectively. And there were global victims, big names, FedEx, Maersk, these big companies who have become almost case studies out of this. I'm going to deep dive a little bit on Maersk for a second. So Maersk, a global shipping company, and they had one machine, one workstation in Odessa in Ukraine. And on that was a trial version of MEDoc software. And that was enough For within minutes and the coming hours after that infection, we're now looking at Port Elizabeth and Newark in America, and they're getting hit, not necessarily with the virus itself and the NotPetya piece, but the consequences of that hitting systems all over the world. And it was resulting in this physical result of tailbacks because nobody could come in or out of the shipyard because it relied on scanning QR codes and all that kind of stuff. And nothing was working. And all this billion-dollar company could do is post this on their website saying, we're sorry, it's unavailable. The law enforcement, police officers, everything came out, turned all the trucks around. These tailbacks were going back miles right across New York itself. And so this becomes very real. Now, for the point of view of Maersk, they're lucky they had deep pockets. So they turned around and said, right, we got to do something about this. And they action straight away, creating this super team of consultants to meet in their head office. And they got the top consultants in the world involved. And they gave them an open checkbook and they said, fix this, make this go away. And they got 600 people working their head office in Maidenhead. They bought up every computer, they hired every hotel room, every B&B, everything to get all these people together. And as they started trying to rebuild all the systems, they realized they had a fundamental problem here and a fundamental challenge, which was their business continuity plans, their cyber resilience plans were based on their Active Directories synchronizing with each other. Now, an Active Directory server is a server that essentially holds the rule base of who has access to what. And without that, you don't really have a network because all you have is data on machines, but nobody knows who can access what application talks to what, all that kind of stuff. And because they all synchronized, they were all corrupt, they were all dead, and they were all useless, save one. And that one was due to a power cut in West Africa in a small office in Ghana. And that server was still perfect and it still had the correct data on it. So they went, great, big sigh of relief, let's just synchronize that up. But the internet connection was so poor, they couldn't do a full synchronization of a full copy up. So they decided what to do is they said, okay, we'll just fly up with the hard drive and bring it up to Maidenhead. But nobody had work visas to be able to get to the UK up to Maidenhead. So they had to create this almost relay race where somebody from the UK went down to Nigeria, somebody from Ghana went over to Nigeria, they handed over the hard drive, that then went back up to Maidenhead and they could rebuild their Active Directory service. So it was by luck, by fluke, by chance, it was fortuitous that they were able to get everything back, because without that drive, without that piece of luck and that power failure, we'd be dealing with a much different kind of consequence. Now, what came out of this is, of course, they tried to put a positive spin on it. So at Davos, the CEO of Maersk was talking about this, and they said, it cost us 350 million. That's a really conservative number, by the way, because we know they paid out huge damages to huge amounts of companies all over the world. A lot of seven-figure checks were written. But let's say it was 350 million. And they said they were going to make cybersecurity a competitive advantage now because they now invested so much in it. But the reality was that pre-NotPetya, Maersk had lots of Windows 2000 servers all over their environment, which were security risks in themselves, kind of page one kind of stuff on why we got those and not supported the full vulnerabilities, yada, yada, yada. And the real lesson for this that we see are things like, for example, although they have security budget and they want to drive a security program, they hadn't linked the improvements in that cybersecurity program to humans and the employees' bonuses, their performance, all of those kind of things. And therefore, people just focused on what would give them a return. How do they get their bonus every year? And if you're not measuring their performance or their attitude and the culture of cybersecurity and not linking that into employment bonuses, well, then guess what? It's not going to improve that much. This is Tom, and Tom works for the Department of Homeland Security, and they estimated that the cost of NotPetya on a global basis was over 10 billion. And again, they say that's a conservative figure. We'll head back now over to the Ukraine, and where are we with ME-Doc? Well, ME-Doc they weren't culpable in any of this. They were essentially, when I say not culpable, they weren't the bad actor here, but their systems had been used and compromised to carry this out. So they were raided by the police, and the police don't know whether they're part of it or not part of it. So that's the greeting they got that day. I've gone down in infamy as being part of that and facilitating that to be able to happen. Now, the world reacted to this. We had politicians all over the world calling out what GRU do on a daily basis. Whether it's the UK, whether it's the United States of America. And this is almost posturing and cyber diplomacy kind of stuff, where, the United States Department of Justice will come out and say, we want to arrest the following people in Unit 61398 of the People's Liberation Army in China, or the following Russian hackers. But these guys are quasi soldiers, quasi mercenaries who are operating maybe for cyber criminal groups under military supervision and military direction. And when we see this footprint, these digital fingerprints in all kinds of attacks where someone's criminal tactics and someone's military precision that it's been done with. So a lot of that kind of diplomacy reaction out of all of that. And when we look at the campaigns that GRU have been behind, trying to swing the French elections, the Ukrainian government critical infrastructure being taken down, worldwide business critical infrastructure with NotPetya's have just gone through, the Olympics in Pyongyang, the Novichok poisoning investigations, and Georgian companies as well were attacked. This is just a small number that were involved with. So again, think of this: cyber criminals, cyber warfare, all of these kind of things, the blurred lines that exist between all of these things and the motivations. And I'm going to bring it back home a little bit, and home being Ireland for me. And in 2021, during the global pandemic, our entire health sector in Ireland became victim to ransomware attack from a group called the Conti ransomware group. And that Conti ransomware group turned $180 million last year, and they've only got 62 staff. Not a bad enterprise, is it? And that Conti ransomware group absolutely work hand in glove with the Russian government. And the day they're on their website, when they have a big victim, the latest ransomware victim, they publish their name. So Health Sector Ireland was listed up there at one stage. But on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, they put up there a message to Vladimir Putin saying, "You have our full support." It's overt. It's there. It's a blind man can see it. These relationships, and what's interesting, and if you have time or you're interested, there's a great story in Wired magazine where a Ukrainian hacker actually hacked Conti ransomware group and got a lot of information supporting this, that it's beyond the theory. And for those of us who work in this area, we know what's real and what's not, and everything else like that. And this relationship is very, very real. The Russian state, controlled by Vladimir Putin, who controls the FSB, who controls the GRU, and the GRU is behind all of these attacks at the end of the day. And pretending that they're this and pretending that that changes nothing. It's the same elephant at the end of the day. And that begs the question: are we dealing with warfare? Are we dealing with crime? Are we dealing with terrorism? What is this kind of threat actor at the end of the day? And to my mind, that's why we bring it all back to what we refer to as cyber evil. And that's what, if you're working in the area of cybersecurity, cyber risk management, you're defeating and working against all of these evil kind of things at the end of the day. Now, I believe in ICTTF, and as I've led it and founded it 10 years ago, that one of our most effective weapons in dealing with this is actually education. It's informing, educating people to be informed, to be able to make the right kinds of decisions. So education is key, getting everybody to understand what the issues are and have the capability of dealing with those issues. And when you think of this, when it comes to something like terrorism in the real physical world, people will be aware that if they saw an unattended bag in an airport, that's maybe not something good, and we should maybe have a second look, and if it's still, and maybe bring it to someone's attention. That instinct, that's your limbic brain kicking in. That instinct is exactly what we need from a cyber perspective. That community, global community of caring what happens in that airport, because it's going to affect us, is what we need to harness and become part of when it comes to defeating cyber evil and cyber threats of all kinds. Because when you're defeating a cyber criminal trying to steal credit card numbers or bank details, you're also stopping pedophiles. You're stopping those that prey on children. So all kinds of cyber evil and those that work within that cyber ecosystem, you're defeating all of it at the same time. And it's not somebody else's responsibility. It's all our responsibility. We have a socio-technical responsibility these days. As we all use the internet, as we're all part of a digital society, we all have, in the same way with COVID, we had responsibility to wash our hands, wear masks, all those things. We also have a cyber hygiene responsibility to deal with this. And that exists in the converging of both worlds, the physical world and the real world. And that's why I conceived this idea of creating business protection officers that will protect businesses through cyber risk management. And that's what we came about. And that's why we push this so high. But when we look at the market, guys, so if you want to look at it from a career point of view, and you look at the amount of CISO roles that are now being paid over $1 million. I think the average CISO salary at the moment is somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000. We read in a survey recently, but there's lots of CISOs being paid over $1 million because finding someone who understands business and understands cyber is like trying to find a unicorn. CISOs are chief information security officers, and they're like CCROs. They're somebody who understands the business context of cyber risk. And that's why so many people that want to become CISOs become CCROs as well, or if they want to work on a board or become a NED, whatever it happens to be. There's a huge demand in that area. And we can see this even up at a board level for non-exec directors and so on. So understanding that the answer lies within organizations. This isn't something you can just buy a piece of technology to deal with or outsource to a consultancy firm. We need to educate our people internally. And that's why we developed a curriculum known as the CCRO, the Certified Cyber Risk Officer course. And I'm just going to very, very quickly fly through some of this to give you an idea of what that's, and then we'll open up the microphones and the camera to have a conversation. And the first module we start with is understanding the cyber risk landscape, getting that understanding and that background to what we're dealing with, and then getting an understanding of how to align that with business, and how to get buy-in from the business, understanding the business value chain, then understanding how to create meaningful metrics, not just technical numbers that won't get buy-in or won't get traction with the business, but meaningful metrics. And we call that cyber risk quantification. Then we move on to things like cyber risk leadership and culture. How do you create a culture? How do you affect and change a culture? How do you attract talent into your organization and even create that brand around being a cyber secure organization? And then we look at cyber risk and the law, which is a vast area from business regulations globally around the world as well. And we look at that from a global perspective. And then we look at cyber resilience and incident management. Cyber resilience is your ability to detect if something has happened, and increase your ability to recover if it has happened. So we look at that. We look at case studies all around that as well. And then we move on to third-party cyber risks. So we're talking about business partners, suppliers, people working from home, contractors, all those kind of things. And we go through all of that area. So this is a vast holistic syllabus delivered over 8 weeks. Then we put it all together in the last module, and we actually look at developing a strategy for an organization. Now, as an organization whose mandate or objective is to help and to share knowledge and build that community, this has been one of the most successful and things I'm most proud of our achievements. And that's what spawned the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women, because this is a great way to share knowledge and to get people to look at this. And we have so many success stories now from people that have left maybe their jobs as being lawyers and they've gone to work in cybersecurity, and it's been their passion, it's what they want to do, and all of these kind of things as we go along. And we encourage people to become a cyber leader. So it's not just simply working in IT security, maybe patching systems, working on firewalls. It's maybe working in other areas, procurement, legal, compliance, AML, whatever it happens to be, human resources, reporting into a board, project management, all of these areas. You can augment your existing business skills and background and acumen with cyber risk management capabilities. And we have a number of offerings on that basis. So rather than me just explain those, because you get lots of that kind of information directly from Natalia, and that what I want to do is be the guy that gets to share this great news, which is for all of you who successfully completed the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women, we're happy to be able to offer you a €1,000 voucher to continue your education for anybody who's registering on the courses in 2022. And for those of you who may recognize that logo in the bottom right-hand side, Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet, for those of you in Ireland, you actually may be eligible for a further grant beyond the €1,000 voucher of that. And again, if you liaise with the team and Natalia, you'll be able to get further details. So I get to be the good guy sharing that news. And now I'm going to hand over to Natalia, who is the driving force behind the Cybersecurity Bootcamp for Women. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you so much, Val, for the presentation. So just about the grant before we go into the questions. I know some of you have already enrolled and started the September course. So we have decided to extend this for the course in 2023, but you need to enroll in 2022. So if you have any questions, just send me an email to Natalia. I will give the general, which is easy, info@icttf.org, info@icttf.org. And I'm happy to assist with any questions you might have. I don't have any questions in the chat. Maybe the students would like to open the camera, the audio, interact directly with me and Paul and ask the questions directly to Paul. You know, Paul, the first one, it's always hard to
Yeah,
get.
it's
They
always hard to
are
get the
a
first one
little bit
off.
shy, you know. But
We
if
might
you
get
don't
the
have
opposite. We
any
might get somebody
questions,
who's not shy.
yes, I believe if you don't have any questions, you and
I do.
oh, Erica, hello, thank you so much.
Hi. I was kind of busy listening to the presentation, and so I didn't put my questions in the chat as yet. Hello, everyone. All right. Oh, first of all, thank you much for the opportunity and also for the information. It's been a journey, and that's a good thing. All right. So I had some questions from the case books. So I'm just going to get right into it. For module 3, there was a section that was dealing with, what was this? You were talking about some of the elements. And for element 6, recovery, I forget what the elements were, but you're speaking specifically to recovery. But I wanted to know if this was under the realm of business continuity planning, or or is there a link to BCP, or is it just
No,
normal
no,
technology recovery?
there is a link. I think if I remember within the curriculum, we refer to it as the cousin of BCP, because generally what will often happen when somebody's developing a business continuity plan, it will be driven by a BIA, business impact assessment, business impact analysis, whatever acronym you prefer to use for that. And they will look at things like work area recovery, have we got desks and seats for people, all those kind of things. And then they'll also link in something like an IT recovery plan and go, well, how do we get our key systems back? The cousin or the glue of all of that holds that kind of systems piece together is when you throw those challenging questions at from an IT perspective or a business perspective, would we know if an incident happened? And would we be able to respond, and would we be able to recover in a timely way? Because it's a different kind of threat than is normally considered. So when people look at business continuity plans, they think fire, flood, they think, maybe a system is down or whatever. But cyber threats are so different. They can be devastating. I mean, you can consider a threat that could take down your bank in 45 seconds. A fire can't do that. And that's why cyber is a little bit different, and generally, absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, it falls within the remit of business continuity and so on. But it is such a specialist area that often the people that work in business continuity just don't have the knowledge or skills to consider those kinds of risks, and the traditional ways and approaches they take are not appropriate when you consider cyber, because the threats are so different on how they actually operate and how they're actually carried out. So in an ideal situation, the people who are handling business continuity will either have the expertise themselves or availability to it to consider and blend it in to their business continuity and business recovery plans. So it's all part of one thing, and you don't end up with a disjointed program. Because at a certain stage of an incident, a cyber incident, you may be invoking business continuity. So it depends, and that has to be tied in with your incident response and incident recovery plans. At what point does this become a business continuity issue? Because there could be 1,000 incidents a day, and they're graded in different ways. But then an instance escalating, and at what stage do we go, hey, it's time for the BCP? We have a business-wide issue here that could affect the entire business or significant parts of the business. So hopefully that helps explain it a little bit further.
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Great,
and if no one else has a question, I have, I think, a couple more.
Sorry, Erica, I will just address Therese's question, and then we come back to
Hmm.
you, if is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, no,
Uh,
thanks.
so, Paul, Therese is
Yeah.
asking, what would be the must-have topics to include in company-wide cybersecurity awareness training?
Well, there's a pretty significant list of things, but if we kick in on the kind of must-have things, is it all boils down to the human vulnerability and instinct of clicking on things like links. And it's like trust but verify. It's those basic sort of cyber hygiene controls. So it's kind of a staggered answer because it really depends on the type of business and the size of business, and things like the BYOD policy, bring your own device policy. Are they updating their own systems, or are using mobile device management? And all their systems are patched. But most bang for buck that comes, and by that I mean the most you're going to receive back from the least amount of investment in your cybersecurity awareness training, is if you can get people to develop a cyber savviness, beyond just following a rule base, that they become loyal to the business, that they care, and they understand that their actions can have a very negative and a very positive impact on the business. So clicking on a link can have that negative impact if it's the wrong link to click on, but also raising your hand and saying, oops, I clicked on the link, could have a very positive impact on the business. Because the balance with cyber awareness training is, if you scare people and they do something wrong, they'll be afraid to report it. But if I've clicked on the link mistakenly and I raise my hand and say that, I may have saved the business, even though maybe the one that has caused the initial issue. So there's a balance there. So when I'm designing cyber awareness training programs and things like that, one of the fundamental things you want to put in there is about making sure you're delivering loyalty. Compliance training is horrible, and a lot of cybersecurity awareness training is horrible because it's mundane. Yes, no, click, 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 all that kind of stuff. So let's be honest. But as humans, if we get the message, if we care about it, and we understand that we can do something that will make a difference, understanding it is so important. About why should I? It's the why should I care about clicking on a link? What's the downside to me and to the business, to my colleagues, to everything else like that? So getting that loyalty, and we cover that off in cyber risk around the culture and leadership section as well, and we talk a lot about that, about developing out awareness training programs and the kind of issues that should be considered when putting them together, because it's a very important piece. And if it just becomes compliance training, it can almost be detrimental. So hopefully that helps a little.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah.
Just answering a comment that Erin published on the chat. We have a session on the dashboard where you can interact with other students. So it would be brilliant if you could send a message there with your LinkedIn and check with the other students if they would like to connect. If you want to connect with me and Paul, mine is Natalia Pinesi, Paul C. Dwyer, as you all know at this stage. So you feel free to connect with us. And regarding to the other students, just publish there. And I think it's the best way for you guys to interact. Erica, we are running out of time. So I took note of the question you put on the chat, and I will forward it to Paul, and he'll be able to revert with an answer.
Sure.
We are close to 5 o'clock, Paul, so we really need to complete the session now.
Perfect. Thanks, Natalia. And thank you all for your participation in the course. I hope you found it very, very useful. I hope you continue your journey with ICTTF and become an important part of that community. Thankfully, we've got real life events coming back now, like our EU Cyber Awards next month and so on. And it's always great to meet and integrate and build that human network, which is so important. Because as I started this presentation off, and I mentioned that phrase about it takes a network to defeat a network, that's so true when it comes to dealing with this. And remember, the bad guys, the network, they share information, they teach and help each other. And that's what we all need to do. It's not just all about connecting into Paul, Natalia, and ICTF, but becoming part of all of that piece of your trusted peers and your trusted group. that can be part of that. And it just leads me to say that, you know, we will support you in your career as you go on, and hopefully we'll meet you in the real world as well, and not just in the virtual world. And hopefully you're in a position to take up the voucher and the offer to continue your training. I hope to be able to do with you guys and learn more about you in the future. And it just leaves me to thank you and wish you the best of luck. Cheers, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Paul. Bye, girls. Thank you so much. Bye bye.